for Sunday, September 20th, or 2020, 2020, September 20th, 2020. I have too many 20s. This is the Pro and the Con Show, and I am your host, Michael James Ott. And as always, thanks for watching the show. I hope you're showing it to other people. Tell them about it. Tell them, hey, there's this guy who's talking to us in plain language and just wants us to be better citizens. And, you know, let's do it. Okay, you and I, hand in hand, arm in arm, let's walk forward together, okay, to a new and better tomorrow. Well, anyway, the show, of course, is promoting this idea that we need to work more closely together, and we need to appreciate that there's a lot of rhetoric out there, a lot of propaganda that's trying to keep us apart, that's trying to drive us into these tribes or into these cults, if you will. Conservative versus Democrat, or liberal, Republican versus Democrat, you know, fascist versus socialist or communist or whatever. It's not true, folks. It's not true. Most of us, the vast majority, if you look, you know, there's always, if you have any education around math and statistics or whatever, you know that there's always a distribution, okay? Almost 340 or roughly 340 million people in this country, and there's a distribution of how we look at that stuff. And the distribution, there's a huge chunk, I don't know, 80%, 85%, where we're in that center maximum, if you will. And we're just looking. Most of us are pretty much centrists. Some of us leaning a little bit more right, some of us leaning a little bit more left. But you know, like I say, 85% of us or whatever, a huge number of us are centrists. And we really want to try to go, you know, kind of toward this middle ground place. And then there's extremists on both sides, and you know, it's their rhetoric and stuff, and especially because there are wealthy, influential people that are trying to control us, and they use the simple tactics and their wealth to spread the message. They're able to use these basic propaganda techniques to try to divide us, and successfully so at this point, into two tribes. And a lot of agonism is the fancy word for it, this warrior stance, where we won't even listen to each other. And it's, quite frankly, bullshit. It's a bunch of bullshit. We're letting ourselves be manipulated, and it is truly bullshit. And we need to stop it. We need to step back and realize that the vast majority of us are centrists. We want to do pretty much the same thing, but we aren't even willing to have that conversation because we're allowing ourselves to be divided into the tribes. Okay, and then it's just immediately hate, agonism, whenever the two sides are brought together. All right, so today's show is called NFL, and yeah, so the NFL has started playing games again, and it's kind of a miracle. They have the players union and the team owners and the coaching staffs and the commissioner's office. They all got together for a handful of months over the summer, and they talked at length as they learned more and more about the coronavirus and the associated illness, the COVID-19. They learned more and more, and they step by step said, okay, we're going to agree to take these, you know, somewhat onerous things. Now, not as onerous as, you know, putting on a uniform and strapping on a rifle and marching into war, but, you know, pretty onerous from the standpoint of submitting to, I think it's daily testing, and then, you know, swearing that they're going to, very carefully follow the guidelines as far as trying to limit transmission. So the players, if you're not actually playing on the field, everyone wears a mask. So the coaching staffs and everything are wearing the mask to try to minimize transmission. Everyone in the whole league, social distancing, whenever they aren't actually in the act of trying to practice or play an actual game, they stay separated. So the meetings that they have, they separate the people inside the buildings, or they hold them virtually. It just goes down and down the list. And amazingly so, and I don't remember the exact statistic, but they had only had 6 positive tests out of, it was a lot, I don't know, 30,000 tests or something. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was great. And now it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep that up. And in fact, I see that the commissioner's office has fined, there was a couple of head coaches in some of the games that did not wear a mask, and they were pretty heavily fined. The coaches themselves were fined $100,000, and the teams involved were fined $250,000 because the coaches weren't wearing the mask on the sideline. And so, yeah, they're taking it pretty seriously, and they're doing a good job. And this, the stadiums, I think there's only been a couple of stadiums that allowed in just a few thousand fans. Most of the stadiums are absolutely empty. And it's interesting. I mean, the football, so they didn't. So a little bit about sports, and then we'll go back to national issues like racism and the pandemic. But the game itself, I've watched a handful of games, and the quality of football has actually been pretty darn good. They didn't have a preseason, okay, and then the stands are empty. So I think on the negative side, they didn't have a preseason, so it was harder to kind of practice some of these things, especially in like a real game situation. So that's what's lead you to believe that probably the football, the first few games wasn't going to be all that high in quality because they hadn't had really the true practice like they normally get in the preseason. But that is offset by the stadiums now are pretty darn quiet, and both teams, actually the home team and the away team, now they're able to communicate much better than they have been. An interesting side effect, so those of you that know the game of football or watch it at all, is the so-called hard count, where the quarterback will get up there and make that noise, and it's intended to try to draw the opposing team off sides. They're supposed to watch the ball, and when the ball snapped, that's when they're supposed to go. But all the players generally, a lot of them don't do that. And so they get drawn off sides. Well, normally there's a lot of crowd noise, and I've saw a few games where people are getting drawn off sides because the quarterback was doing that hard count thing, and it was so quiet in the stadium that I think the players, hadn't got used to the fact that the quarterback could be heard that well when they're doing these hard counts to try to get them to, wrongly jump off sides before the play actually starts. Anyway, so the positive is, and so through 2 weeks, things are kind of going okay. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll still be true. Hopefully the players will stay healthy, and the things that they're doing, which, by the way, is very effective. Wear masks, stay distant from each other, wash your hands a lot, and then get tested on a regular basis. You do those things, and if you have symptoms or you get a positive test, you isolate or quarantine. it's not rocket science, as they say, although our president would seem to seem to, it's rocket science for him. He can't seem to figure that out. Anyway, the other thing that I wanted to talk about the NFL was their commitment and their addressing of racism. So one of the things that was very controversial was, they were players. This was a few years ago. They started to Colin Kaepernick, I think, was kind of the first guy, but they started to protest by not standing with their hand on their chest during the national anthem at the beginning of games. By the way, national anthem wasn't always at the beginning of games. It's only been over the last handful of years that that's been thrown in there. But anyway, and that was, he was protesting the fact that African Americans and other minorities, are mistreated and are not treated equally here in this country. And he's absolutely right. That's true. And he took a knee. And then other players started doing it. And then there was this controversy because the one cult said, well, they're denigrating the flag, or they're denigrating the country. And where the other cult said, no, I mean, this is free speech. And they're basically saying, hey, I'm drawing attention to the fact, this true fact, absolutely true fact, that racism is alive and unfortunately well in this country, and people are treated, on large scale, unfairly, unequally, based on the color of their skin or the religion or whatever. And so, that was the controversy. Well, now, and I have to say that this is, I think it's way better. So they're still having, the teams are still discussing, and some teams are not, they're not even coming out for the national anthem. Other teams are standing, but they're standing in solidarity, arm in arm. Other teams are taking a knee during the national anthem. But all of them, thankfully, and they're working with the commissioner's office, they're working with the owners, they're working with the networks that televise, that broadcast the games around the country, and they're doing what I think is going to be even more effective, way more effective actually, and that is that there are commercials advertising, and they're talking about racism and working on it, and police brutality and all these things, and they're very effective. I've seen, I don't know, half a dozen of these advertisements, public service announcements, and they're very good. They're very good about talking about these issues and explaining them, and asking people to please work on these issues and move them forward. Every day, every step, trying to close that gap between how people that look like me, yes, I am fortunate, people that look like me, close the gap between people that look like me and people that don't look like me. And I wholeheartedly applaud the effort, and I hope that we are successful as a nation, as a community, as neighbors, to see the truth and spread the light and move forward, reducing this true, factual, racial divide in equality in this country. And the NFL, I think, has taken very strong steps forward. And I think that they've instituted the advertising. I think they've instituted some other community efforts and things like that. And the owners are pitching in money to do all this. The players are using their popularity. The coaching staffs, everyone is kicking together, and great for them, great for the country. Let's all go forward and follow their lead and do what we can to be better citizens. Be better citizens. Okay. All right. So the Pro and Con Show. My name is Michael James Ott, and until the next show, bye for now.